Have you ever walked into a room where your name was on the list, only to feel like you were never supposed to be there? That was the moment everything changed for Dr. Celeste Morgan. She wasn't a celebrity, not a fashion mogul. She didn't wear diamond cuffs or carry a designer clutch, but she had something none of them could replicate: dignity. The quiet, unwavering kind. The kind you don't inherit, you build, piece by piece, lecture by lecture, battle by battle. Celeste was a tenured ethics professor at a prestigious university, a published scholar, and the woman behind a dozen public policy initiatives. But that Saturday, she was just someone's wife. At least, that's how the Langford family saw her. The occasion was a birthday party. Not just any birthday, the 6th birthday of Madeline Langford, daughter of hedge fund aristocrats. The kind of party where the gift bags were worth more than rent, and where the invitations were edged in real gold leaf. Her husband, Nathaniel Morgan, had confirmed the reservation himself: a private table, right by the garden window at Le Séjour, one of the most exclusive restaurants in the city. Nathaniel, as always, was understated in how he moved through wealth. No loud suits, no flashy cars, just results. Quiet ones. Which is why when he said, "We'll be at that party," Celeste didn't argue. She didn't need to impress anyone, but she knew how rooms like that work. She wasn't nervous, not exactly, but as she looked at the heavy ivory envelope on the kitchen counter that morning, with the Langford crest stamped in gold, something inside her clenched. Not fear. Not pride. Something deeper. The instinct women like her develop in elite spaces: awareness. She dressed with precision. A cream satin wrap dress, minimal jewelry, low heels, her hair pulled into a neat twist. She didn't want to blend in, she simply refused to perform. Nathaniel had texted her earlier. "Running late. Start without me. Be gracious. But don't shrink." She smiled at that. He always knew the right words. At exactly 3:12 p.m., her car pulled up to Le Séjour's marble entryway. Everything about the restaurant was curated to intimidate, from the doorman's tailored uniforms to the valet's practiced glance. When the driver opened her door, there was a slight pause. The kind of pause that scans for context. But she walked past it, chin up, shoulders back. The lobby inside was hushed elegance. Glass chandeliers shimmered overhead like a constellation frozen in motion. The hostess stand gleamed beneath soft lighting. A woman in a sleek bun, her name tag read. Courtney glanced up with a pre-programmed smile. "Good afternoon," Celeste said, calmly. "I'm here for the Langford party. The Morgans should be on the guest list. We have a table reserved." Courtney's smile flickered. She flipped open a leather-bound reservation book. Her eyes scanned. Once, twice, then stopped. She looked up. "I'm sorry, ma'am, I don't see that name here." Celeste's tone didn't change. "My husband called earlier this week. Nathaniel Morgan, table by the garden window." There was a pause, a beat too long. "I'll get our floor manager," Courtney said. Celeste stepped aside, composed but alert. Her breath stayed steady, but her mind was tracking everything: the glances, the whispers, the discomfort they thought she couldn't see. Minutes ticked by. Guests breezed past. A tall woman in red stilettos was ushered to the lounge with champagne already waiting. A couple in golf polos were seated instantly. But Celeste? She remained near the entrance like a misplaced coat. And then it happened. A blonde woman in an emerald dress floated in, greeting Courtney like an old friend. "Miss Waverly," Courtney beamed. "Table 3, of course your favorite spot." Celeste turned, her voice still even. "Excuse me, that's the table reserved under our name." Courtney didn't blink. There must have been a mix-up. Behind her, a man emerged, mid-40s, sleek gray suit, slicked back hair, cologne like citrus and authority. His name tag said Stephen Ward, general manager. He looked at Celeste like an equation that didn't balance. "Apologies, but that table's already occupied. We can offer a quieter seat near the kitchen." The kitchen. Celeste stood taller. She didn't argue, didn't plead, just locked eyes with him and said, very quietly, "Are you offering me the kitchen because you think I belong there?" Stephen didn't answer. He didn't need to. She looked around. No Nathaniel, no backup, no friendly faces, just chandeliers, cold smiles, and the unmistakable feeling of being dismissed, not as a guest, but as a mistake. And just when Stephen raised his hand toward security, just when the room exhaled as if this was over, the soft hum of a black Tesla whispered outside. The doors open, and everything in Le Séjour, every glance, every breath, every illusion of power was about to shift. The doors hadn't even fully closed behind him, but the room already knew something had changed. Nathaniel Morgan stepped into Le Séjour, not with noise, but with weight. He didn't strut, he didn't flash a watch or demand attention. But still everyone turned. His suit, slate gray, tailored with ruthless precision. His expression, unreadable. His presence, unmistakable. He was the kind of man who never needed to say he belonged. The room said it for him. But his eyes? His eyes didn't scan the glittering crowd or the curated perfection. They went straight to Celeste, still standing by the door, still dignified, still unseated. He crossed the marble floor in 10 measured steps. "You've been standing here this whole time?" he asked, his voice low, threaded with quiet fury. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. The answer lived in her posture: straight spine, clenched jaw, hands gently folded as if holding back something volcanic. Nathaniel turned to the hostess stand. "Mr. Morgan," Stephen the manager began, smoothing the front of his jacket. "We were just about to." Nathaniel raised a hand. Didn't speak. Didn't need to. Stephen stopped. Nathaniel's gaze shifted to the hostess, then to the reservation book. With one calm motion, he pulled out his phone, tapped a screen, and turned it toward them. "This," he said evenly, "is a confirmed reservation. Table 3, booked under Celeste Morgan, time-stamped, verified, and now erased." He looked up. "Would you care to explain?" Stephen's smile returned brittle, plastic, strained. "Mr. Morgan, it's possible the name was misplaced. Or perhaps we misunderstood the party size." Nathaniel cut in. "You didn't misplace anything. You chose. You looked at my wife and decided she didn't belong at your best table. So you gave it to someone who looked more convenient." The words settled like dust, slow, inescapable. A ripple moved through the restaurant. A champagne flute tilted in midair. Conversations stumbled. Forks froze halfway to lips. From her seat at table 3, the woman in emerald, Caroline Waverly, lifted her glass and offered a bemused smile. "This is getting dramatic," she called out with a brittle laugh. "It's just a table." Celeste stepped forward then, voice calm but cutting. "No, Miss Waverly, it's not just a table. For women like me, it's a battleground. And sometimes, it's the only place where we're forced to prove we exist." Caroline blinked. Her smirk faltered. Stephen tried again. "Mr. Morgan, we truly didn't know she was." Nathaniel's voice dropped. "You didn't need to know. You only needed to respect the name, the reservation, the person." He turned slowly, addressing the room now, not just the staff. "Some of you might be wondering why this matters, why I care this much. But what you just witnessed, what you participated in, even silently, is the exact reason I stayed invisible in this restaurant's operations for so long." The crowd stilled. Yes, Nathaniel wasn't just a guest. He was the primary investor behind Les Séjours, a silent partner holding 60% majority, watching from the shadows to see how the place operated when nobody was watching back. "I didn't need a spotlight," he continued. "I needed the truth." And now, he had it. Stephen swallowed hard. The mask of control slipped. "Sir, if I may." "You may not," Nathaniel said without even looking at him. "You will, however, attend an emergency board meeting tonight at 7:30. And you will explain to the board why my wife, a tenured professor, a published author, and one of the most accomplished women in this city, was treated like she was lucky to be offered a seat near the kitchen." Courtney, the hostess, looked down at her shoes. One of the bartenders stepped into the back. The room breathed slower, heavier. Nathaniel turned back to Celeste. "Would you like to sit now?" he asked, gently offering his hand. She took it. As they walked together toward table 3, Caroline Waverly stood up, still clinging to the remains of her superiority. "I assumed it was open seating," she muttered, trying to salvage grace. Celeste stopped, turned to her, and said, clearly, "You didn't assume. You knew. You knew the power of your presence. But what you didn't know was mine." Then she sat down. No fanfare, no applause. But the room shifted. And not because someone raised their voice, because someone refused to shrink. Celeste sat without adjusting her posture. She didn't need to lean into comfort. Comfort had never been given to her. She had earned every inch of presence she now claimed. Nathaniel remained standing behind her chair, his hand resting lightly on the back, not to shield her, not to dominate, but to say, "I'm still here." Stephen lingered several paces away, jaw clenched, voice lost. His polished shoes seemed suddenly too tight. Every practiced grin, every curated apology, had failed him. And worse, he knew the room saw it. "Mr. Morgan," he began again, this time quieter, "if there's anything we can do to make this right." Nathaniel turned his head slightly. "You already made a choice, Stephen. Now you'll learn that choices come with cost." Celeste sipped from the water glass in front of her. Her hands were steady, but inside, she felt the burn not of rage, but of reckoning. It wasn't just about her. She could feel it now, eyes watching from every corner. Some were curious, some afraid, some ashamed, but most were silent, just like they had been when it happened to others. She leaned slightly, placing both palms on the edge of the table. "You want to know what silence feels like?" she said, not loud, but with a razor-sharp clarity. "It feels like being erased before you even arrive. It feels like smiling through the moment someone calls your dignity a misunderstanding." Her voice didn't crack. It cut. Stephen tried to pivot. "It was a system error." "No," Nathaniel said. "It was a human decision. But let's test your system anyway." He pulled a folded sheet from the inside of his blazer. Thick, precise, time-stamped. "This is the auto-generated edit log from your own reservation software. Table 3. booked under Celeste Morgan at 3:01 p.m. At 2:48 p.m. today, it was overridden and reassigned to Waverly, Caroline. Only management has access to VIP table changes. Stephen paled. Courtney, the hostess, shrank into herself. Nathaniel's voice dropped lower, firmer. So tell me, Stephen, did you think that no one would notice? That if she left quietly, no one would question why the only black woman in the room was redirected toward the kitchen? The silence was thick now, not awkward, but damning. Celeste didn't look at Stephen. She looked across the room, to the mural on the back wall. It was a painting of French vineyards, soft pastels, and rolling fields. The kind of image meant to soothe, not challenge. How many times had she been sat under that painting, in other restaurants, other cities, while being spoken over, talked down to, dismissed. And now, finally, the frame cracked. You built this place, she said to her husband, but they tried to shrink me inside it. Nathaniel's face remained still, but his hand tightened on the back of her chair. You won't have to fight that alone again, he said. From the bar, a young black server, no more than 22, stepped forward hesitantly. His name tag read Isaiah. He cleared his throat. Dr. Morgan, he said, I've seen this happen, not just to you, to others. It happens when we're quiet, and I've been quiet too long. Stephen turned, alarm flashing across his face. Isaiah, don't... But it was too late. I've been passed over for promotions, twice, Isaiah said, and every time I asked why, I got reshuffled to night shifts, closed bar, back corner tables. Celeste turned her eyes to him. They didn't soften, they strengthened. Thank you, she said simply. Nathaniel looked toward the lounge. Bring the assistant general manager, he said to Courtney. She hesitated. Now. Minutes later, a woman arrived. Tall, sharp-eyed, nervous. Her name was Rachel Layton, and she looked like someone who had just walked into a meeting she wasn't supposed to hear. Rachel, Nathaniel said calmly, prepare an emergency board session for tonight, all stakeholders, all department heads. Stephen, you'll be expected to explain this. Stephen opened his mouth, but Nathaniel raised one finger. No more words. From now on, we'll speak in documents. He slid a small flash drive across the table. This contains the last 6 months of reservation overrides, including every time a guest's name disappeared, and every time the mistake looked like her. The flash drive stopped just short of Stephen's elbow. He didn't touch it. The room didn't breathe. At last, Nathaniel sat beside Celeste, finally, at the table that had nearly been stolen from her. She didn't smirk, didn't celebrate. She simply reached across, placed her hand atop his, and whispered, "Let's eat." And with that, the room exhaled, not out of comfort, but out of reckoning. That evening, as twilight washed the skyline in soft violet hues, the dining room at Le Séjour carried the scent of seared scallops and unease. Table 3, now reoccupied by its rightful guest, no longer felt like just a table. It was a witness, a symbol. And in the hours that followed, it would become something more, a turning point. Upstairs, behind frosted glass walls, the boardroom filled slowly, not with voices of power, but with shadows of responsibility. Executives, investors, lawyers, everyone who had once treated the brand like a luxury commodity was now forced to reckon with the uncomfortable truth. They had built something beautiful on a fault line. Nathaniel Morgan stood at the head of the obsidian conference table, calm, prepared, with a thick file of reservation logs, internal emails, and policy gaps that, together, painted a picture of a culture more obsessed with image than integrity. And seated across from him, stiff in his chair, was Stephen Ward, stripped of every layer of charm that had once protected him. No one spoke in his defense. No one dared. "Gentlemen," Nathaniel began, "this isn't just about what happened at table 3. It's about every time we looked the other way when someone who didn't fit the aesthetic was treated as disposable." He pressed a button. The screen behind him lit up a simple graph. 17 documented cases in the past year, 12 involving last-minute overrides, 10 involving guests of color. No alarms, no lawsuits. Just people who left quietly. Until tonight. Stephen shifted. "You're acting like I created this culture. But you stayed silent too. You let it happen." Nathaniel's gaze didn't waver. "I stayed silent to observe. You stayed silent to survive. The difference is, I never used my silence to erase someone." The vote was unanimous. Stephen's termination was processed on the spot, his access revoked, his future with the brand gone, like the names he once crossed out. But the consequences didn't stop at the boardroom door. By morning, headlines began to swirl. "Silent bias at elite restaurant exposed by owner's wife." "Professors erased reservation sparks industry reckoning." "Luxury, redefined, the woman who took back table 3." And through it all, Dr. Celeste Morgan never once asked for attention. She declined interviews, ignored press inquiries, let the facts speak for her. But one day later, on the university blog where she taught ethics, she posted a single statement. When a room built by your family tries to seat you near the kitchen, it's not just bad service. It's the blueprint of exclusion being laid bare. We don't need louder voices, we need better architecture. It was shared 28,000 times in one day. Le séjour didn't collapse. It transformed. Reservation systems were overhauled. Internal oversight committees were formed. A plaque was quietly added beneath the host stand, engraved in brushed steel. Table 3, where we learned that presence is not granted, it is claimed. And Isaiah, the young server who had dared to speak, was promoted to Director of Guest Experience. His first order of business? Weekly listening sessions for staff, anonymous reporting channels, and a training program called Service Without Assumption, developed with Celeste's guidance. But the real moment came exactly 1 week later. A black SUV pulled to the curb outside Le Séjour. No photographers, no red carpet, just the sound of footsteps. Celeste stepped out. This time, not to prove anything. This time, not alone. Beside her walked Maya, a former hostess who had once been told to straighten her curls to match the clientele. Now she stood in a navy blazer embroidered with gold thread that read, "Equity is the new luxury." Celeste entered not as an exception, but as a standard, a new one. As she approached table 3, she noticed something unexpected. There, resting beside the water glasses, was a small, black frame. Inside, printed on archival parchment, was a single reservation slip, time-stamped, signed, and preserved. Her name, her rightful place. She smiled, not wide, not triumphant, just, true. Nathaniel leaned toward her. They asked if we wanted it engraved in gold. I said no. Why not? She asked softly. He looked around the room. Because gold fades. But truth? Truth etches itself in memory. She nodded, fingertips grazing the glass. And somewhere in the back of the restaurant, a couple stood up and applauded. Quietly, respectfully. The room didn't erupt. It listened. For the first time it truly listened. And as Celeste took her seat, something settled across the dining hall. A message. A reminder. That dignity never demands permission. That presence doesn't need permission slips. That power can sit in silence and still shift the room. So let me ask you, how many Table 3s exist around us right now in restaurants, in boardrooms, in classrooms where someone's worth is silently erased before they ever sit down? And what would it take to reclaim them? Sometimes, it begins with one woman refusing to move. Sometimes, it begins with someone saying, "You don't need to see my worth, I brought it with me." And sometimes history doesn't need fireworks. It just needs a name that refuses to disappear.